All right, good evening. My name is Rachel Wilbrack. I am the program director that works with the College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences. This is how to write a scientific research resume. This information is always helpful, but hopefully especially helpful if you're thinking about the career fair that's coming up next week. Very briefly, when you're thinking about resumes, it's really important to think about a couple of different things. What's the purpose of this resume? Who do you expect to be the intended reader? What message do you want to send? These are important things to think about and consider when writing your resume or editing your resume, because your resume is probably going to look very different if you're applying different types of positions. So if you're looking for a research opportunity, whether that's an internship or research on campus, you're volunteering, whatever that is, the resume that you use to submit to find one of those opportunities will probably look different than if you were looking for a part-time position on the side just to make some extra money, right? You're probably not going to give all of the details of your lab experience in a resume for a position as a server, right? Or an office assistant on campus. So thinking about what the purpose of the resume is, what type of position you're trying to get, who the intended reader is, all important things to think about as you are developing a resume for an application. So things that you've probably seen before, and true of all resumes for the most part, right? You're gonna have your heading at the top. That's gonna be your name, contact information. So you might choose to list your whole address or maybe even just city and state, but you're definitely gonna wanna make sure that you have your email, your phone, because those are the two ways they're going to contact you if they wanna interview you, if they wanna talk to you further. You might also choose to have, and I would encourage it, having the link to your LinkedIn, so that way they can see more experience. Often with a resume, it might only be one page. You may not be able to include everything you've done. LinkedIn can be everything that you've done. So if you have a link to that, they can go and look for more information. They could also potentially connect with you if they want. So that might be in your heading. Next thing you're gonna see, of course, is education. So University of Maryland is gonna be at the top with the degree that you're currently pursuing. If you have attended other institutions, you might choose to put those on there too. If you have an associate's, I would definitely recommend putting that. If you have any other degrees really, before the one you're currently working on, put that on there. If it's something where you went somewhere and you transferred, but maybe you didn't get a degree from that institution, you don't need to list that. And of course, at this point with education, you don't list your high school. They will know that you have your high school diploma because you're here in Maryland. Next, for a lot of you, I think a skills section might be the next thing. And that might be different than you've heard. You might have typically heard that skills go at the bottom. But if you're writing a resume and your skill list is going to be really important to the person who's looking at it and showcasing the skills and experiences you have, you may want to move that skills section up and have it right up under education. So if you're applying to positions where specific research or lab experiences are important, or technical experiences, you're going to want to have that right under education so they see it quickly. An employer can quickly scan and see what those skills are and make sure that you have the skills they're hopefully looking for. After that is going to be one, maybe many sections of experience. So you might choose to split that up in a lot of different ways. You may just have one section that you call experience, and hopefully you're going into more detail about those skills that you listed in the skills section. But you might also choose to break it up. Let's say you have a lot of research experience, but you also have some part-time jobs and you want to showcase some of your transferable skills there. You might choose to do your lab experience or your research experience section and then do like another experience, or call it relevant experience, another experience. But just remember that experience is anything that has given you a skill or has helped you showcase those skills, experiences. It doesn't just have to be something you got paid for. So whether paid or unpaid, doesn't matter. Think, in terms of internships, research in a lab, but also if you've done clinical experience, that could be on there. If you volunteered, if you have class projects or side projects you've decided to do on your own, studying abroad, leadership opportunities, student organizations, if you've been a tutor, part-time jobs, all those things can lead to showing your experience and what you can bring to an organization. Someone just asked a question, should you ever include non-technical skills in the skills section? If it's relevant to the position that you're applying to, I will, or I would. Also, if you have foreign language skills, maybe they don't need you to have a foreign language skill, but I would say that could definitely go there. I think what often people think, and sometimes you see in skills, is you see like communication skills or hard worker or attention to detail. I would not put those in your skills section. They are very important, don't get me wrong, but it's much more important to put those and show those into your experience. Like if you have a specific position and then in your bullet points, you're showing how you have those strong communication skills, it's going to mean a lot more to an employer, and they're going to be able to see, and it's almost giving them proof versus just seeing a line in your skills section that says communication skills, and they either have to believe you or not believe you. So yes, there can be some non-technical skills, but I would say they should still be things like maybe like language, things like that. If it's something like soft skills, what they often refer to as soft skills, right, as communication, leadership, things like that, I would work that into your bullet points for your experience. Great question. Personal statement on a resume. I would also lump this into like the objective. Most of the time, you're not going to need it. For the most part, at least with objectives, employers for the most part don't read them. They know the objective is to get the position you're applying to. That being said, a personal statement or a professional statement, sometimes even at the top, like if you really want to highlight something, like let's say, you know, maybe you have a major in one area, but you're looking to get into experience in another, and you feel like a professional statement or a personal statement at the top might help to show why your experience isn't completely related to what you're going into. That could be helpful. Or sometimes I've seen this with returning students where they've worked and had a job for 10 years and then they came back and got a degree or got a second degree. And so they want to have that professional statement that shows that they can specifically say something like 10 years of experience in XYZ. So most of the time, most traditional undergrad students probably won't need that personal or professional statement. But sometimes you will see that, and it can definitely have a reason to use that if you really need to specifically highlight something. Someone also asked about relevant coursework. It could be, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. If you did, you'd probably put that in, like at the bottom of your education section. It could potentially be in your experience. It kind of depends, I think, on how you want to showcase that. So if it's a matter of you want to list a couple of classes, that relevant classes you've taken, I would suggest putting that in education. If you want to pick out one specific class and say, I want to write bullet points, I want to say exactly what I did, what I accomplished in this class, what I learned, then that might be a good time to put that in experience because you're going to kind of go into more detail and more depth. Great questions, guys. Thanks. So education, getting back to that. You're going to have University of Maryland first. Even if you have other institutions, it's your most recent, right? So I'm assuming if you're on this call with me, that is your most recent, your most in what you're doing now. You're going to want to make sure that you list the full degree. So whether that's Bachelor of Science, chemistry, or in chemistry, doesn't matter. Just making sure you do that full degree. You're working really hard. Give it the full weight. You know, make sure you're writing Bachelor of Science, not just saying, you know, like majoring in chemistry. It doesn't necessarily matter whether you want to list your degree first or Maryland first, but typically one is above the other, whichever you want to highlight more. To me, it doesn't matter. I don't think for most employers it does. You're going to want to share your expected graduation date. They're not so much concerned when you started. So sometimes I've seen like August 2019 to present. What they're more interested in is when you're graduating. So expected graduation is going to tell them almost all they need to know. So if they see December 2020, they're going to know you're looking for a full-time job right now. Even if they see May 2020, May 2021, they may assume you're looking for a full-time job. If they see anything after that, they're going to assume you're probably looking for a part-time or an internship because they're going to know you're still in school. GPA. If you have a GPA above 3.0, definitely list it. That doesn't mean that you can't list it if it's under a 3.0, of course. But if it's above a 3.0, that's great. You worked hard for that. List it. Make sure they know. If you have a position that you're applying to that requires you list your GPA, no matter what it is, of course, you're going to list it on your resume. It'll make it easier for them to find. You can also split it up. I've seen some people, like maybe your overall GPA isn't as good because there's a couple I don't know, English classes that gave you trouble or something, or an econ class, but your science GPA or your specific major GPA is stronger, then you might choose to maybe list your major GPA because that's the higher number you can share. Someone asked about minors. Absolutely. If you have a minor, that should be on here. I should add that to my slide for the future. Thank you. But yes, if you have a minor, that can go on here. Typically, you'll have, University of Maryland, you'll have the degree, and then you can have a minor listed as well. Or minors, I guess. I don't know. Do they let you have more than one? I don't even know anymore. It's been a while since I was a student here. Standing out from the crowd. Yes, if you have a concentration within your major, that's also important. Lots of times, especially with biological sciences, I see this where students will say, Bachelor of Science in Gen Bio. And Gen Bio is the concentration. The major is actually biological sciences. So what I would list is Bachelor of Science, in or comma biological sciences, and then concentration in, and share that. So that way they can see specifically what area you're in. Coming back to classes and this comment about standing out from the crowd, keeping in mind that other people in your major have taken a lot of the same classes, not necessarily every single class that you have, but they've taken a lot of the same courses. Coursework can be a good thing to mention under education if it's a very specific course that's related to the position you're applying to, or if it's a more advanced class that maybe not every university offers, or not every student takes. But you certainly don't need to list every single class within your major. They're going to know if you're a chemistry major, you've taken a fair amount of chemistry classes. If you're a bio major, you've taken a fair amount of bio classes, right? They're going to understand that. So keep in mind that your experience is going to mean more than just listing off a few more classes. Okay. So experience, getting into the heart of that, and we'll come back to skills too. If you think I jumped over it, I did, but we'll come back to it, I promise. With experience, you always want to be detailed but concise. So give them a lot of information, but don't take too long. It's kind of sometimes a fine line, I know, but the more you can give them, the more detail, the better they can understand the work that you've done, and the better you can show what you've accomplished in positions. Always start with a strong action verb. It helps to paint a picture of the work that you've done. Be careful, don't start with words like worked or helped or assisted, because it doesn't really tell you much. That's not the skill, right? The fact that you helped to plan an event, what you really want to tell them is that you planned an event. So in that case, if it's a matter of not wanting to take full credit for something, then say planned an event, you're going to give more detail than that, but this is my simple example for the presentation. Planned an event as a member of a 3-person team. That way you're not taking full credit, of course, but you are showcasing what the actual skill is. In that case, helping or assisting isn't what you want them to know. You want them to know that you have the skill in planning an event. All right. Would an outsider understand your experience? This is really important, and this is where quantifying your experience can help. If you were a tutor and you tutored 10 students, that's going to look a little bit more impressive potentially than if you were a tutor and you only had 1 student. Obviously, number of hours and things can change that, but being able to quantify how many students you worked with, or if you were part of a student organization and you helped increase membership by 10%, or you participated in a fundraiser and raised $3,000, like being able to share some of this information and help an outsider understand your experience and what your impact on an organization was is going to be more helpful for them to understand what you can do. So anytime you can quantify that, make sure that they understand. In some cases, it might be explaining a project and giving people more details. You can kind of work that into describing what you've done in certain roles. When you can, especially with quantifying, this can really be helpful. Have your bullet points read as accomplishments rather than just a task. It shouldn't be, I did this, I did this, I did that, right? It should be showing how you've made an impact on an organization. Did you save an organization money? Did you help them become more efficient? Did you have a certain role on a project in a lab that allowed for this larger thing to happen because you were helping with this piece? Help to show how you were part of that bigger picture. it can help, again, an outsider understand the work that you've done. Right. Don't just list the project, list your role in the project. So if you were a leader, let them know. Make sure that they know that you were the person who led. Talk about maybe tasks that you delegated, or how you managed the group. If you weren't the leader, that's okay. Being able to show that you can be a team player and play your part is just as important. But like, if you were the person who wrote the paper that went along with the project, that was your role, make sure that's in there. If you were the person who had to do some coding, great, put that in there. If the experience was virtual, how would we include that? It can still be in your resume just like any other experience. If you want them to specifically know that it was virtual, I think you could work that into your bullet point potentially. It could be, whatever you have written as the bullet point, and then maybe say, that you did X, Y, and Z as part of a virtual internship. Or if you really wanted to, I guess you could put next to, like if your title was intern, virtual intern, or something like that. But the work that you're doing is the same, whether you did it in person at the location or at home, right? It's the skill's still the same no matter where you did it. So I don't think that employers will be too concerned. But maybe that's a plus in some cases. Maybe you're looking for another virtual opportunity and you want to show that you've already done this and been trusted to do that. Then it could be good to mention that it was a virtual opportunity. Should you use the accurate verb tense, a mix of past and present, or stay consistent? This is great. Love this question. If it is something that you are currently doing, present tense. If it's something that is over, you have finished doing it, it's a research opportunity that you did 2 years ago, past tense. Which can be confusing sometimes because you can have something like a position that you are in currently, but you've already planned an event, you would still use plan, even because the opportunity itself is currently happening. All right, be honest. Okay, so hopefully this isn't an issue for anybody, but I always like to mention, like, if you're a cashier, say you were a cashier. Don't worry about fluffing up the title or making it sound more impressive. If you say like monetary transaction engineer, first of all, they're going to be like, what the heck is that? And once they realize that you mean cashier, they're going to wonder why you're trying to, make it sound better, the title anyway, sound better than it is. If you have opportunities that maybe aren't as related to the work that you're interested in, those are still really helpful to have on a resume. They can help show things that we call transferable skills. So going back to things like communication skills, working in a fast-paced environment, teamwork, attention to detail. I have some students that come and they say, oh, I was just a server. I was like, okay, just a server. So you can work in a fast-paced environment on a busy night. You can work as a member of team. You can keep track of details like who ordered what. Like if you're listing something like that, you're not going to say took orders, brought people their food. Like those are not your bullet points. Your bullet points are going to be sticking to those bigger overarching transferable skills that are important no matter what job you go into. So yes, you're going to list the most recent, the most relevant experiences probably first and probably in a section that's more pronounced on your resume, but those other things that aren't as related can still show really important skills that are important in labs too. Is nannying or babysitting legitimate enough of a job to include? Absolutely. Someone trusted you with their kid. That's a big deal, right? People typically don't trust people they don't trust, for lack of a better way of saying it, with their children. They're important, right? So if someone trusted you, absolutely, especially if you worked for them for a long time, it shows that they found you responsible and trusted you for a long period of time, just like holding a job for a long period of time. That's a great question. Also, I find that when we're talking about research, oftentimes professors and PIs look at their research as their baby, right? So if they can see that you were trusted with someone's kid, they might trust you with their research. Okay, so going into experience a little bit more, if you went above and beyond on a project, make sure that you point that out. If you, I think I mentioned this before, but like if you were the person who wrote the paper for the entire group, share that. If your group was part of a contest in the class or within the organization and you won or came in second, share that too. give them some context, right? Again, it helps to kind of point to the accomplishment, especially if you were ranked in a contest or something like that. Or if you're promoted, absolutely put if you were promoted, because that shows that they liked you in your current job and trusted you to take on more responsibility. Even if you weren't promoted, if you were the person in charge of training new employees, that means they liked the way that you did your work and wanted you to teach other people how to do it the same. I see this a lot, especially with labs, with someone who's maybe been there a couple years. You were the person who got to train other people coming in. It means they liked your technique and what you did. That can tell someone who's looking at your resume a lot. Don't forget volunteer experience. I already kind of talked before. Research and soft skills are good. Volunteer work, again, you don't have to be paid for something to count as experience for it to be worthwhile. So keep those in mind. Leadership opportunities, whether it's church, cheerleading, a sport. If you had an impact in an organization, put it down. If it's an organization that you maybe went to 2 meetings a semester, maybe not the best example. If you weren't as involved, but if you have that student organization that you were going to meetings, listening to lectures, helping to plan events, fundraising, like absolutely those are things to put down. All right. This is a brief example. I know that it is not scientifically related. I also know that some of you maybe have not been on campus and have not had a resident assistant, but hopefully you know that resident assistants exist and that we have them on campus, and you can agree that for the most part, they're responsible for residents in a hall. They plan programs, and sometimes they might even advise a hall council. So all those things in that top one are true. Hopefully we all agree that the second one looks a little bit more impressive, or a lot more impressive. It's just kind of to show you can be concise, but if you can be concise and add the details in there, and so adding the fact that it was 60 residents and what issues they might have helped their students with, that how many programs they planned and what topics they covered, that they managed a budget, all things that can be helpful, again, into just kind of giving the person who's reading your resume a better idea of what you've done. It also looks more impressive if you can add numbers and add a little bit more depth to your answer. It also helps to fill up the resume so it doesn't look blank. All right, so back to the skills, which I told you we were going to come back to. So this is the section that for most of you, I think will probably be helpful being right after education. List lab skills. Think about procedures, techniques, machinery, software you've used, programming languages, potentially if you've helped out with that. Anything that you feel confident in that could be helpful to the position that you're applying to, I would put it on there. So you might get some of these skills through research outside of class. This could be from internships. It could also come from your lab courses. If you haven't had an opportunity to do research yet, you might not have that internship yet, right? Or you might not have had outside research. So to start with, it might come from your classes, and that's okay because you've done some of these things in your classes. So being able to share that so an employer can see that is going to be helpful. It's okay to list things that maybe you're still learning. If you've only done it once, I wouldn't list it, but if it's something where you don't feel super confident, but you're still kind of learning it and you're progressing, maybe it's a certification you're working towards, those kind of things can be on here. If it's something that you feel like you're a beginner at and you don't want to maybe claim that you know something better than you do, you could always decide to take your skills section and break it up into things that you feel like you are more proficient in, or maybe even intermediate is the word. But if it's something where you're like, I don't know it as much, you could use beginner just to kind of show that it's something, or even basic, to show that it's something you're still kind of learning. If there's a specific skill that you have a significant amount of experience in, like a number of years, like maybe you spent 2 years in a lab, and so there's a couple things that you know how to do really well because you've done them for 2 years, make sure that's evident. But just remember, if it's on your resume, it's fair game. Expect people to ask you about it if it's on your resume. If there's something you definitely don't want to talk about, it shouldn't be on your resume. We talked about the skills section and how this can be a way for an employer to quickly scan and see if you have certain skills that they're looking for. That doesn't mean that that's the only place those skills should be. You should work those skills into the experience and make sure that if it's in your lab skills section or your research skills section, whatever you're calling it, and then you later have that internship experience, that you're explaining what you did, right? explaining how you used that piece of machinery or what technique or whatever it is. Giving a little, it helps to kind of flesh it out a little bit. And then of course, don't claim to be an expert or advanced. Hopefully this is obvious, but if you're not, because you don't want to have it seem as if you're exaggerating your experience if you can't live up to that if they start asking you questions about it. But I don't think that's a problem. You guys wouldn't do that. Nobody does. So still need experience. Again, I understand that some people are on this call and already have had this experience. Some are still looking to find it. Great, I'm glad you're here. Volunteer for an opportunity that's similar to your interests or your area of passion. Maybe there's a past project, or you can start your own project, on the side to kind of give yourself some more experience. Choose a job that's related to a field of interest. Maybe you're hoping to find a research opportunity on campus and you've reached out to some professors and nobody needs anybody right now. But hopefully in the future, when more of us are on campus, there's an opportunity to work in the physics department office, right? Because you're a physics major and you want more research experience. Working as a student assistant in the physics office, or insert your major here, could give you, some experience with the transferable skills, but also being in that office means you will potentially have access to more professors, right? So then you have the opportunity to get to know them better. Maybe they have opportunities, or maybe you now have a professor that's in your corner to sing your praises to other people that might be looking for students. So it may start off as not totally related to what you want to do, but can be an entryway potentially into finding other things. So those are ways that you can use getting experience to help get yourself closer to a field that you're interested in and the work that you actually want to do. While we've all heard, it takes experience to get experience, and that is such a frustrating thing to hear and to feel, you have a lot of things that constitute as experience. It doesn't always feel that way. I know I have students that come in with their resume and they're like, I don't really have experience. And then I look and they've done all these things. It just may not be the exact experience they wanted to do so far. So take what you have, the things that you've done, and find ways to use that to get you closer to the experience that you're trying to get. Like I said, whether it's volunteering or doing something that's tangential to the work that you actually want to do to help you get where you want. No path is the same. Sometimes it kind of swirls around before you actually get there. But it's definitely okay to still be working at it. All right, this is a sample resume. Just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things I've talked about. You'll notice that this has an objective on it. That's because this is in our TERP guide, and there are some people in our office that really still feel like an objective is important. I have not heard an employer say that they read objectives in a long time. But if you're going to list one, here's an example of how you could list one. Obviously the education's on here. You can see that there's a technical skills section. You could label this technical skills, research skills, lab skills, whatever you want. In this case, this person has their research experience because they want to highlight and pull the most recent experience within research up to the top. What is cut off because of how big this page is the fact that there is a section right under it that says other experience, where they have their part-time work at Home Depot and I think a case competition or something like that. So this can just kind of show how you can pull the most important things that you really want them to see to the top, because like maybe they are still currently at that part-time job. So you don't want that to be the first thing you see within the experience section. So that's where you can have that other experience and have it the first thing in that second section. All right, so some general resume tips for all types of resumes. Usually want to stick to 10 to 12 point font. That just helps you not go too small that someone has trouble reading it, and also it doesn't go too big so it feels like you're trying to compensate for a lack of experience or lack of things on a resume by just increasing font size. You can also play with margins a little bit. So if you have a lot of experience and you're trying to get it all onto one page, you might do the 10-point font and a 1/2 inch margin. If you maybe don't have as much and you're still waiting to kind of get some more experience, maybe you're doing 12-point font and 1 inch margins. With the margins, that's all around. So that's top and bottom, left and right. I mentioned 1 page. So there are some exceptions. But for the most part, if you are an undergraduate student applying to a position, 1 page is usually sufficient. The exceptions are, if you are applying to graduate school, they expect to see potentially more than one page, right? If someday you're writing a CV, that is way more than one page usually, lots of different things on there. If you are applying to the federal government, they want to see anything and everything. So don't worry if that's more than one page. I would also recommend if you're applying to the federal government, use the resume builder that is in USA Jobs, or if it's an intelligence agency on their website, because often that will be the format that they are used to looking at a resume in, and it will make sure that you don't forget anything. Because on a typical resume, you're not going to list who your supervisor is or how many hours you worked. But sometimes with federal jobs, they like to see that. So if you use the federal resume builder, USA Jobs, it will ask you all those things and fill it in for you. And so you won't have to worry about missing any important piece of information. Someone asked about single spacing. That's absolutely acceptable. Yep, not a problem. You can use single space. No high school after sophomore year. So typically what we say is after your sophomore year of college, the high school experience should not be on there anymore, unless it is something really super impressive or really relevant. Hopefully chances are you have more recent and more relevant experience by the time you get to, end of your sophomore year, beginning of junior year. One exception might be if you, like I said, in addition to the really impressive or really related to what you're looking to do, might be if you got you're an Eagle Scout or Girl Scout Gold Award. Those are things that people recognize and know the work that goes into them. And if you got that while in high school, that might be another exception. With resumes, there isn't necessarily with one right or wrong font or way to format something. There are definitely some things that, I would recommend, but for the most part, it's going to be keeping it clean and consistent. So if you decide that you're going to italicize your title and then bold the organization, just make sure that that is the same the whole way through. You don't want it to switch from one section to the next. If you're going to put periods at the end of your bullet points, great. Just make sure they're always there. If you don't want to put it, that's fine too. Again, neither is right or wrong. It's just being consistent. And avoiding excessive white space, only because if you have too much of it, it makes your resume and the page look kind of empty, and then it makes it look like you don't have much experience. Playing with font margins. Oftentimes I find what can fix excessive white space is adding a little bit more depth and detail to your bullet points. Those can be helpful. Okay, so tips from employers. These are things that I've kind of gathered over a few years. List lab and volunteer projects you've worked on to show more relevant experience. So if you haven't had that first research experience yet, maybe listing one of your lab classes as an experience and like building it out and putting bullet points might be a way to help show your skill set. So those are things that you can keep in mind. List outside the class projects, student organizations. Again, it's not just the things you got paid for. I've heard from one employer that they actually do like to see your hobbies on a resume. So I guess take that for what it's worth. I find that for the most part, most employers don't really care about your hobbies unless it's something that's super related to the job that you're applying to. Like, I don't know how this would be research related, but let's say you're applying to a job at Expedia or Travelocity and you want to show that your hobby is traveling, that's related. But in the most case, not necessarily important. I did do a presentation yesterday on technical resumes, and someone brought up the fact that their hobby was blacksmithing, which might be worth mentioning because it's just so unique and not many people do it. And that person also talked about how they had helped to kind of build their space and get all the equipment and things like that. So that might be able to show like more of a skill and not just a hobby. Not that other things don't have a skill, but hopefully you understand what I mean. It might actually lead to someone pointing that out on a resume and maybe talking more about that. But in general, you're going to want to list the things that are more relevant to the positions that you're applying to. Tailor your resume to the company or the position. If you're preparing for the career fair, you could, but you're not going to have 20 or 30 different versions of your resume. Tailor them when you're applying to the position. If you're applying to a lot of different types of positions, that's going to be more necessary. If you're applying to a lot of very similar positions, you probably won't have to tailor too much between one to the next. And of course, be concise when you can. I had a couple questions here come in. Listing a lab you've done research in, should it be titled as PI's name, lab, and then elaborate on neuroscience? Absolutely, you can. I've seen it both ways. I've seen where someone will list a PI's name and then what they were doing. I've also seen where they list what the lab is. So in this, in this example, maybe neuroscience lab, or the specific name of the lab if there's a specific project they're working on. And then they might mention in one of the bullet points who they worked with. They might say, researched X, Y, and Z with this person. I think, unless the PI is someone who is super well known in the field, their name isn't necessarily going to help you when you're applying. It's going to be the type of lab and what you did in the lab. So I would probably go for that second example of saying what the lab is, or like either the specific name or the type of work that they did, and then mentioning the PI's name in the bullet point. Someone else has said, what about mentioning a hobby that can double as a personal project? Example, you have a concrete final product you delivered. Absolutely, yeah. If this is a hobby where you have a concrete, yeah. Or like, even if your hobby is doing crafts and you're selling stuff on Etsy, like that, absolutely. I think it's just, you want to be careful about like just putting like, I like to travel in like basketball, or I like football. Like, for one, travel, I think, is just something that most people like to do, so it doesn't really tell them much. They might be able to assume that about you anyways. But yes, if it's a hobby that can double down specifically as a personal project, if there's a final product, if you can use it to show a specific skill or talent that they might be interested in, like developing a product and selling it might show some entrepreneurial spirit, absolutely. Those are things to mention. All right, so some takeaways. I mentioned this before, but try to keep bullet points from being just, a task list or job descriptions. When you can, really pointing out how you have certain accomplishments in those positions, or the impact that you had to the project or the organization, just helps make it stand out and feel stronger. It helps to set you apart. Write every bullet point that the reader can visualize the task that you're performing. Use strong action verbs, again, avoiding things like helped, assisted, worked, things like that, using, contributed, participated, engaged, developed, whatever word best describes what you did. Remember that there is a chance that your resume could be scanned, so make sure you're using the relevant words, whether those are skills in your skills section. You will know what the relevant words are based on the job description or the description of the lab and the work that they're doing. Make sure that you have, if not the exact same word or experience, find things that are similar that will show you can do what they're asking you to do in the job description. And then pop at the top. This is just the idea that you want the most impressive stuff at the top. So this is why I mentioned potentially maybe having more than one experience section, because you always want the most recent in every section to be at the top. So if your part-time job just to make some money that isn't related is more recent, you don't want that at the top when you want to highlight your lab experience. So that might be where you do the two different sections so that within each section, the most recent is at the top. All right, so the fair is coming up next week. I will have the dates and information on the next slide. But if you are looking for some help, or after this you make some changes and you want someone to look at your resume, whether it's for the fair or for future things, there is one final day of career fair prep drop-in hours. That's tomorrow. I do expect it probably to be the busiest day this week. People tend to wait a little bit. So I would say come and get in the waiting room early, because I won't be able to stay too long after 3 o'clock, unfortunately. So that is my recommendation. There will not be drop-in hours with the University Career Center at CMNS on Monday, because we will be preparing for the CS Fair, which is Monday. But there will be peer career educator hours. So in addition to my hours, we have peer career educators that we train that are fantastic, that can do resume reviews. And so that information is on here, and you can sign into Careers for Terps from our website, and then look under center events and workshops and find that, and you can sign up for a time slot. Should you put publications at the top? If you have a publication, it could be listed in its own section. It could be listed in like the specific lab where you received that publication. I don't think it necessarily needs to be at the very top. I would probably put your experience section first, but like, let's say you have a related experience and an other, I would maybe put it between the two. Publications are impressive, and I don't mean that like putting them down lower means it's not as important. I think because the publication section is usually like one line and it usually stands on its own, you don't have to worry about it being at the very top. What is considered a presentation? Does it have to be a conference? No, it doesn't have to be a conference. If you've participated in the undergraduate research day here on campus or a poster session, put that on there. If you've talked about your work with other people and explained it, absolutely, I would count those as presentations, and they can be on your resume as well. Great questions. All right, so if you are planning to come to the Fall Current Internship Fair next week, just a reminder that it is 3 days. There are different employers each day. So make sure you know who's coming which day. Day 1 is STEM, and day 2 is STEM and all majors. Day 3 is all majors. So my guess is most of the employers that you would be interested in are going to be there day 1 or day 2. You can go into the events calendar and see the links to sign up and say that you're attending. Once you say you're attending, you can actually see the employers that are attending each day. So you'll know who's coming and which day you want to make sure you're there and who you want to kind of target. And then there are some other events coming up for the rest of the semester, which are going to be here before I know it. Careers in Allied Health, which is a collaboration between myself and the program director in the School of Public Health. So far, we have confirmed a physical therapist, a pharmacist, and a nurse. And we are, I think, looking and hoping to get an occupational therapist. Careers in Data Science and Data Analysis is coming up as well. That, off the top of my head, I cannot remember everyone's coming, but I know that we have someone from the Baltimore Orioles that works with their statistics department. He's been on past presentations. We have someone that works in health statistics that my colleague found, but I do not remember exactly where they work, but we have, I think, like 5 different panelists for that one. So if you're interested in data science, allied health, those are opportunities for you to check out that are coming up this semester. All right, this is my contact information. Jeffrey is not in the call, but he is my graduate assistant. He's awesome. I'm going to put his contact information on here in case you want to reach out to him too, or instead of me, whatever works. There is a link here if you wanted to find the events calendar. That will help you find the Fall Current Internship Fair as well as any of the events that our office plans. I know I've been answering questions as we've gone along, but does anybody have additional questions that they want to put in the chat for me to answer? Or if you need me to go back to a slide because you missed something. While I'm asking that, I'm also going to, if you were not here at the very beginning, I did provide a link. I'm going to provide it again. This is just briefly for attendance taking. If you wouldn't mind clicking on it, if you haven't already, we'll ask for an access number. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep it really simple. And then on the next screen, it will allow you to type in your UID. So if you have not done that, please do that for me before you leave. All right, I am not getting any other questions. I will be here for another minute or two, but it seems like this might be the end. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you being here. I hope this was helpful. Please reach out in the future if you have any questions. That's what I'm here for. Bye, guys.